Welcome to Empathy Stories, the channel where we explore the transformative power of kindness, connection, and resilience through heartwarming tales. Today, we bring you an incredible story of an unlikely friendship between a woman and a stray dog that changed both their lives forever. Stay with us as we uncover the profound lessons in love and healing that this journey holds. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Sarah's modest kitchen as she brewed her coffee. Her thoughts scattered between work and the echoes of her recent divorce. It was one of those mornings where silence felt heavier, the kind that amplified every thought of solitude. She sipped her coffee, glancing absent-mindedly through the kitchen window, when a movement on the lawn caught her eye. A thin, scruffy dog stood there, its matted fur clinging to its frail frame. Its brown eyes, tired but soulful, locked onto hers. At first, Sarah felt a wave of irritation. Another stray. She had always been against allowing animals to roam freely in her yard, let alone entertaining the idea of bringing one into her home. Yet there was something unsettlingly captivating about this dog. It didn't bark, growl, or run. It simply stood there, almost frozen, as though it had resigned itself to whatever fate awaited it. Sarah set down her mug and walked closer to the window. Her curiosity piqued. The dog's gaze remained steady, its tail unmoving, and for reasons she couldn't quite explain. Sarah felt an ache deep in her chest. There was a story in those eyes, a story she didn't know but could sense. Pushing aside her instinct to shut the blinds and ignore the situation, she opened the door. "Go on." "Shoo," she called out, trying to sound firm. The dog didn't flinch. It simply bent its front paws slightly, as though bracing itself for rejection. Her words faded into the cool air as a pang of guilt struck her. She sighed deeply and stepped outside, a mix of hesitation and pity guiding her. "You're not going to leave, are you?" she murmured. The dog's response was silence, its head tilting slightly as if it understood her. Tentatively, she crouched down, maintaining a safe distance. "Wait here," she said, retreating into the house. Moments later, she emerged with an old blanket and a bowl of water. As she approached, the dog flinched but didn't retreat. She laid the blanket on the grass and placed the bowl beside it. "There," she said softly, watching the dog edge closer. It sniffed the water cautiously before lapping it up with evident desperation. Sarah couldn't help but notice how thin it was, its ribs visible beneath the filthy, tangled fur. Her irritation dissolved, replaced by an unexplainable urge to help. "You look like you've been through hell," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The dog finished drinking and looked at her again, its eyes filled with gratitude. It was a look that stayed with her even as she went back inside, unable to shake the feeling that this stray had walked into her life for a reason. Hours later, the dog was still there, curled up on the blanket she'd left. By then, Sarah's heart had softened completely. She went outside again, this time with a small plate of leftover chicken. "Here," she said, placing it down and stepping back. The dog hesitated for a moment before cautiously approaching the plate. Watching it eat, Sarah felt an odd sense of fulfillment. This act of kindness, so simple yet profound, brought a warmth she hadn't felt in months. As the day faded into evening, Sarah knew she couldn't leave the dog outside. "All right," she said reluctantly, "but just for tonight." She carried the blanket inside and motioned for the dog to follow. It hesitated, as if unsure of her intentions, but eventually stepped inside, its movement slow and deliberate. She filled the bathtub with warm water, unsure how the dog would react. To her surprise, it stood still as she gently washed away the dirt and grime. Underneath the tangled mess, Scars crisscrossed its body, a silent testament to a life of hardship. Her heart broke for the creature. "You've been through so much," she whispered, tears welling up as she ran her fingers through its now clean fur. When the bath was done, she dried the dog and made a bed for it near the fireplace. It settled in without protest, its eyes finally showing a glimmer of trust. Sarah sat nearby, watching it fall asleep. For the first time in what felt like forever, her home didn't feel quite so empty. In that quiet moment, she decided to give the dog a name, Maximum. Something about the name felt strong, fitting for a survivor. As the flames danced in the hearth, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what had brought Max to her doorstep. She didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter was the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever. The days that followed brought a quiet sense of purpose to Sarah's life. Max quickly became her shadow, following her every move with a loyalty that seemed both instinctual and earned. Every morning, as she brewed her coffee, he sat by her side, his eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and gratitude. Sarah found herself talking to him as though he could understand, sharing thoughts she hadn't voiced in years. Somehow, in his silent companionship, she felt truly heard. One afternoon, as Sarah brushed Max's fur near the fireplace, she noticed something unusual, a faint outline of an old scar on his neck, hidden beneath his newly groomed coat. It was a clean mark, almost as though something had once been tightly fastened there. Her fingers hesitated over it, and she felt a surge of curiosity. Max didn't flinch, he simply looked up at her with those deep, knowing eyes. "You've been through a lot, haven't you, boy?" she murmured. The question hung in the air as she wondered what kind of life this dog had led before wandering onto her lawn. The thought haunted her that night, and by morning, she resolved to find out more about Max's past. Sarah took Max to the local veterinarian, Dr. Nelson, whose gentle demeanor immediately put both of them at ease. As Max sat patiently on the examination table, Dr. Nelson examined him with care. "He's in surprisingly good health, considering his condition when you found him," she said. "But he's clearly been through some tough times. See these scars? They're old, likely from years of neglect or abuse." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat as she listened. "Do you think he belonged to someone before?" she asked. "It's possible," Dr. Nelson replied, stroking Max's head. "Dogs like him don't just appear out of nowhere. Sometimes, they carry pieces of their past with them." She turned to Sarah with a thoughtful look. "Have you considered checking with local shelters or animal records? They might have some information." The idea lingered with Sarah, and the following day, she made a few calls. Eventually, one shelter responded with surprising news. A dog matching Max's description had been reported seen years ago near an old, abandoned property on the outskirts of town. Intrigued, Sarah decided to visit the site, with Max eagerly wagging his tail beside her. When they arrived, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The property was overgrown with weeds, its weathered walls hinting at a time long past. Max sniffed the air and began to pull gently on his leash, leading her toward the house. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and sunlight filtered through cracked windows, casting eerie shadows across the room. It was here, in the corner of what appeared to be an old living room, that Max stopped and pawed at a wooden chest. Curiosity overtook Sarah as she opened the chest, revealing a trove of forgotten belongings, old photographs, letters, and a leather dog collar. The collar bore the name Max etched into a tarnished brass plate. Her breath caught as she looked at Maximum, who now sat calmly, his tail sweeping the floor. "This was your home," she whispered, realizing the weight of what she'd uncovered. Among the belongings, Sarah found a photograph of a man she recognized as her late grandfather, holding a dog that looked just like Maximum. Her heart raced as she read through the letters, which revealed an extraordinary bond between her grandfather and his loyal companion. Max had been more than just a pet, he had been a source of comfort during her grandfather's loneliest years. Tears welled up as the pieces fell into place. Somehow, against all odds, this dog had found its way back to her family, as if carrying a message from the past. She gently placed the collar around Max's neck, and he nuzzled her hand in response. At that moment, Sarah felt a connection she couldn't explain, a sense of being anchored to something greater than herself. Driving back home with Max that evening, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the significance of their meeting. She realized that Max wasn't just a stray who had wandered into her life, he was a part of her story, a living thread connecting her to her family's history. As they walked into her home, Max lay down by the fireplace, the brass plate on his collar gleaming faintly in the firelight. Sarah sat beside him, her hand resting on his head. For the first time in years, her home felt full, not just of warmth, but of purpose and a renewed sense of belonging. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's life began to take on a new rhythm. Max wasn't just her companion, he was her partner in rediscovering joy. Every morning, the two ventured out into the crisp countryside, Max trotting ahead with an energy that seemed to grow each day. His once wary eyes now shone with a trust that melted Sarah's heart. On one particular morning, as the autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, Sarah stopped at the top of a hill to take in the view. Max sat beside her, his tail thumping softly against the ground. "You've given me more than I ever thought I could have again," she whispered, running her fingers through his soft fur. He leaned into her touch, his presence speaking the kind of comfort words never could. Max's unwavering loyalty began to transform Sarah in ways she hadn't anticipated. After years of feeling broken from her failed marriage, she had grown accustomed to guarding her heart. But Max had a way of breaking down those walls, one gentle nudge at a time. His love was simple, unconditional, something she had long thought impossible to find. One evening, as Sarah flipped through the old letters she had found in the abandoned house, she came across a passage that struck her deeply. Her grandfather had written, "In Maximum, I found a friend who never judged, never faltered, and never turned away. He reminded me of the best parts of myself, parts one thought I'd lost." Sarah set the letter down, her chest tightening. She realized how much those words resonated with her now. Max had done for her what he had once done for her grandfather. He had brought light into her darkest days and reminded her of her own strength. Word of Sarah's remarkable connection with Max began to spread through the small town. Her neighbors, who had once kept their distance, now stopped to chat during her walks with Maximum. They marveled at the story of the dog who had returned to his family after so many years. And through these conversations, Sarah found herself slowly reconnecting with her community. One day, as Sarah and Max strolled through the local park, a young girl approached them hesitantly. She had heard the story about Max and wanted to meet him. Sarah knelt down to introduce her to Maximum, who wagged his tail and licked the girl's hand. Watching Max bring a smile to the girl's face filled Sarah with a quiet sense of pride. She realized that Max's kindness and resilience had not only healed her but was now touching the lives of others. As the months passed, Sarah began to open herself up to new opportunities. She started volunteering at the local animal shelter, inspired by Max's journey and the countless other animals who needed a second chance. Max often accompanied her, his calm demeanor helping to soothe even the most frightened animals. Together, they became a source of hope for those who had lost their way. One evening, after a particularly rewarding day at the shelter, Sarah sat by the fireplace. Max curled up at her feet, She thought about how much her life had changed since the day he appeared in her yard. She had gone from feeling lost and alone to building a life filled with purpose, connection, and love. Looking down at Maximum, Sarah smiled. "You've taught me so much." "You know," she said softly, "you've shown me that love doesn't have to be complicated or conditional. It can be as simple as being there, day after day, no matter what." Max opened his eyes and gave a small wag of his tail, as if to say he understood. For Sarah, this was more than enough. In Maximum, she had found a kindred spirit, a companion who had not only healed her heart but reminded her of the beauty in life's simplest moments. And so, their days continued, filled with quiet walks, shared sunsets, and an unspoken bond that grew deeper with each passing moment. In Max's unconditional love, Sarah found not just healing, but a renewed faith in herself and the world around her. For the first time in years, she felt truly whole, and for that, she knew she would always be grateful. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey here at Empathy Stories. Sarah and Max's story reminds us that sometimes love and healing come from the most unexpected places. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Let's continue spreading compassion and hope, one story at a time. We'll see you in the next video.